It's 10 to 7 on December 12th of 2024. We're here for special representative town meeting. I want to begin by asking the town clerk, please, to confirm the meeting has been properly warned. All right, we've got confirmation the meeting has been properly warned. Everybody who's going to be voting tonight, please make sure that you've checked in with the attendance. Only authorized people can sit in the meeting area, and we would ask all voting members to take a seat in the voting area. There are a lot of people who are in attendance and are standing at the sides. If you've got an intention to vote, we do ask that you be in a seat, at least by the time voting takes place. Members should have name tags with lanyards on, and please make sure to return your badges to the check-in table after the meeting adjourns. The quorum would be 77 members. I would interrogate the town clerk whether we have a quorum. All right, we have a quorum. Congratulations. Restrooms and exits are out of this room and to the right, and follow the signs. I would ask the town clerk, please, to read the opening and closing paragraphs of the warning. Please.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. The legal voters qualified to vote in representative town meeting are hereby notified and warned to meet in the gymnasium of the Academy School on Thursday, December 12th, 2024 at 6:00 p.m. to enact on the articles listed below. Dated at Brattleboro, Vermont, this 5th day of November 2024, Brattleboro Selectboard, Daniel Quip, Chair, Elizabeth McLaughlin, Vice Chair, Richard Davis, Clerk, Franz Reichsman, and Peter Case. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to speak briefly about the procedures that we're going to be following during the meeting. Robert's Rules of Order are the procedural rules for the meeting. Although Robert's rules call for amendments to articles, and for those to be in writing and provided to me as the moderator. I'm David Gardenstein. Hi. There's no amendments that are going to be possible to Article 1 because Article 1 was brought before you by petition and by statute. This is an up or down vote to disapprove the acceptable community conduct ordinance. So that means that although there's been some significant interest expressed to me about the possibility of amendments and voting about parts of the ordinance, there won't be any amendments and those would be ruled out of order. Now, Robert's rules. Yes, sir, Ms. Moore.
Up or down vote on the changes to the code of conduct, or up or down vote on the whole conduct code of conduct?
The code of conduct is 6 pages as adopted by Selectboard. There's a copy for anybody who wants one at the back table. The vote tonight, and this is what I'm going to next, the vote tonight is on an article to disapprove the ordinance. As a general matter, Robert's rules call for motions to be worded in the affirmative. So we're generally taking positive action. However, under the applicable statute, which is section 1973 of Title 24, this is a meeting to consider whether to disapprove this ordinance as adopted by Select Board. So if you vote yes on the article when it's been made and seconded and after it's been debated on and after discussion is closed, if you vote yes, you're voting yes to disapprove the ordinance. And if you vote no, you're going to be voting to leave it in place as is, as adopted by Select Board. So one of my roles as moderator is to make sure that the nature of the action you're taking is clear. And I will try to repeat a number of times over the course of the night. A yes vote is to disapprove this ordinance, and a no vote is to leave it alone as is, so it takes effect as is. Now, another one of my roles, besides trying to make sure things are clear, is to try to ensure that discussion is conducted respectfully. It's clear that people may have strong positions about the ordinance and about its potential impacts. Applauding and cheering is just the flip side of the coin from booing and hissing. And we would request that people not applaud and not boo during the course of the meeting. Please express your views by raising your hand, asking to be recognized, speaking to the matter, and voting. I'm also going to note that there's a range of different comments that I expect people would like to make over the course of the evening. People want to express their views about the ordinance, either opposed or in favor. People may want to reply to comments as they're made by others. People may have questions that they want to pose. We'll do our best over the course of the meeting to take opposing views one after the next, hoping to have a vigorous discussion about the matter. Hopefully, the meeting over the course of the next hour and a half or 2 hours will police itself so that we're not hearing repetitive comments. If you've heard your comments made already, please at least consider the possibility that those matters have already been heard and that maybe the comments needn't be repeated, maybe. Please don't move your chairs, okay? The chairs are set up in a manner that's hopefully meant to keep order here. We have 2 microphones in the front of the room. Once you've been recognized, please come to the microphone to speak so that you can be seen and recorded by the camera. If members of the public wish to be heard, please raise your hands. As a general matter, we have a 2-minute time limit on people's individual comments. And people who are members of town meeting, both those previously elected and those caucused in tonight, will be recognized first to speak for 2 minutes. After everybody who's in the meeting has had an opportunity to speak, we'll look forward to taking comments from members of the public. And then we'll go around again. People will not be recognized as a general matter to speak for a second time until all other members have had a chance to speak first. There may be exceptions depending on whether there's back and forth inquiry. Comments need to be germane to the motion that's on the floor. We're taking a relatively broad view of what is germane. And since there's no amendments, there's not going to have to be any rulings on whether an amendment is germane. I've had a lot of discussions with town meeting members and others about what might or might not be germane to the topics that are here for discussion tonight, which is to disapprove the ordinance. Please try to keep your comments on point. The meeting is being broadcast live by BCTV on Comcast Channel 1079 and on Facebook at Brattleboro Community TV. It'll be rebroadcast on that same channel 1079 and available online at brattleboro.tv.org. Our deaf and hard of hearing interpreters are Alicia Youngman and Rachel Heller. We thank them for their work tonight. They'll be here until 9 o'clock. So hopefully we'll have our meeting wrapped up by about then. So the need for interpreters will be dispensed with at that point. Right, so when you vote, given that there's a lot of people in the back and on the sides, we're gonna ask you please to stand and to hold your cards up so we know that the people who are voting are members of town meeting. I'm also going to note right now that the moderator has also already made the determination that the vote at the very least on Article 1 is going to be by standing and division. So we're not going to be asking for a voice vote with standing at the time that a vote is ready to be taken, and after all discussion has been had, we're going to ask people who are in favor of disapproving the ordinance, which means kicking the ordinance, which is an aye vote, to stand and wait to be counted. And then after they're all counted, we'll ask those who are against the article, who want the ordinance to remain in place, to stand and wait to be counted. With that background information, the moderator recognizes the Select Board Chair, Daniel Quip, for preliminary motion number 1.
Great, thanks, Mr. Moderator. Okay, I move that the following persons be authorized to remain in the meeting with the Select Board and town meeting members: Town Manager John Potter, Town Attorney Robert Fisher, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Morland, and Executive Assistant Jessica Stickler.
Is there a second? It's been, Mr. Cook seconds. It's been moved and seconded that the following persons be authorized to remain in the meeting with the Select Board and town meeting members: Town Manager John Potter, Town Attorney Robert Fisher, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland, and Executive Assistant Jessica Stickler. Is there any discussion? Are you ready for that question? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please rise and say aye. I guess. Aye. Thank you for raising your cards. I guess that wasn't necessary right now. All those opposed, please rise and say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've adopted preliminary motion number 1. Moderator also recognizes Daniel Quip for preliminary motion number 2.
I move that the electronic media and the ASL interpreters be permitted to remain in the meeting.
Is there a second? Mr. Stroud seconds the motion. It's been moved and seconded that the electronic media and the ASL interpreters be permitted to remain in the meeting. Is there any discussion? You ready for that question? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please rise and say aye. Aye. Thank you. All those opposed, please rise and say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've adopted preliminary motion number 2. Article number 1, the moderator recognizes Christina Cheonier.
Do I have to read?
No, just you can read your article.
Agenda.
You have a copy? Here you go. You can read it from there.
Oh, thank you. I can see it now. Christina Cheonier, District 8. I move to disapprove the amendment to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, Chapter 13, Article 9, Acceptable Community Conduct, as adopted by the Select Board on September 17th, 2024.
Is there a second? Second. Ms. Melton seconds. It's been moved and seconded that the amendment to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, Chapter 13, Article 9, Acceptable Community Conduct, as adopted by the Select Board on September 17, 2024, be disapproved. Ms. Cheonier, do you want to speak to that motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's commendable that the Select Board took steps to address the massive systemic problems our town is facing, and I'm sure they trusted this ordinance was legal and constitutional when the town manager and town attorney proposed it. However, I spoke with the ACLU attorneys who are watching closely, and they have expressed to me that the way the ordinance is written makes it very likely that if challenged in court, all or part of the ordinance would be invalidated and the town would have to pay money in damages. The attorney pointed out many ways this ordinance is poorly written and poorly thought out. Technically, anyone who uses the restroom at the library is in violation of the ordinance. We understand that's not what you meant, but it is indicative of how sloppily this is written. Laws that are poorly written that give folks discretion to apply it in arbitrary and selective ways do not fare well in court. So unfortunately, what the Select Board and the town manager have been telling us are the strengths of this ordinance are actually its greatest legal weaknesses. We simply cannot set up a system of civil charges in a quick and cheap manner that doesn't open the town up for expensive lawsuits. Constitutional rights are at their peak in Category 3 areas, which include the municipal center, library, transportation center, all of the public property. The government has to be even more careful to protect these spaces and has a duty to guarantee the most right of access. When an individual is trespassed from public property, it must be very specific about the duration and location. Robust appeal rights must be provided, and the trespass must be for no longer than absolutely necessary. This ordinance fails to provide any of those safeguards required by law. Giving power to one person, our town manager, to decide if someone can access their constitutional rights or government services is not robust appeal rights. In fact, this is exactly the type of ordinance that lands towns in hot water. To regain access to public property, you would have to convince our town manager that your treatment plan is robust enough. Respectfully, they're not qualified to do this, and this is not a path the town wants to go down. Under this ordinance, the town manager would have a lot of power and discretion to decide how this is enforced, which is deeply problematic. The way that this ordinance was written almost guarantees arbitrary and selective enforcement. In fact, that is what the Select Board has been describing as part of their plan for enforcement. They're not using those words, but they're promoting this ordinance as a tool they won't have to use very often, which is very problematic from a legal standpoint. Arbitrary and selective enforcement is unconstitutional and illegal. Ordinances must be enforced evenly, with neutral principles, and in ways that everybody in the public understands. In summary, 2 reasons to vote yes are to prevent the town from being sued, especially in a time when we cannot afford that, and ensure constitutional rights are upheld. We have an opportunity tonight as elected representatives to vote yes and stop this attempt at solving our town's problems by chipping away at constitutional rights. I am honored to be here tonight and put this motion on the floor, as my job as an RTM member compels me to do whenever anyone's constitutional rights are threatened. And I am relieved to know that if we fail to uphold the rights of everyone in Brattleboro tonight, there are attorneys ready and waiting to do the job for us. Hopefully it won't come to that. Now let's have the community conversation we never got to have.
Does anybody want to be recognized to speak? This would be the time to raise your hands. Ms. Hoskawa. Yes, I think that there were some people who may have prepared remarks. Generally, Robert's rules call on us not to be reading from notes, but to have notes available. Please do your best to speak slowly so the interpreters can interpret. Thank you. Yeah. No, thank you. That's a nice offer, though.
I've been following all the discussion very closely, and the one thing that I have not heard is whether or not anybody has been cited or ticketed, or however you want to say it, under this ordinance since September 17th.
A member of Select Board or administration is interrogated if they wish to be.
The answer is no, because it's not in effect yet until after the vote tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Heller.
Oscar Heller, District 9. I was wondering if, for everyone here, Bob Fisher, if you have an opinion on the legal exposure and how well you think it would hold up, all those questions. Thank you.
Town attorney is interrogated.
That's a fairly broad question. We wouldn't be putting it forward to the Select Board to vote on and adopt without thinking that it is defendable in court. I am aware of other folks who have mentioned cases from other jurisdictions, and when I've looked at those actual ordinances in those cases, they're sufficiently different from the ones that we have. I have also done some research into fellow or other towns here in Vermont, such as Montpelier, which has ordinances with regard to public urination and defecation being ticketable offense, and Essex Junction, the ability to give tickets and or notices against trespass. St. Albans, for example, has a high response public nuisance property ordinance, actually quite similar in that that exempts out domestic violence calls, as does ours. So it's not to say that a town, I can't predict whether a town is going to be sued or not sued, but when we look at what the town is trying to regulate with regard to the health, safety, public welfare, and the the rational relation, and depending on the different levels that you use, if there's a fundamental right at issue, then it becomes strict scrutiny, and there needs to be a compelling governmental interest. But when you look at the safety issues, the health issues, we believe that we can support that if called upon to defend it in a court of law.
Eli? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, please. I'm sorry. HB Lozito.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm also too short. Oh my God. HB Lozito, District 8. I would like to interrogate an expert member of the public. Is this an appropriate time?
Why don't you pose your inquiry and we'll
Great.
see if that's the way to go.
So a lot of the conversation that I have been a part of the last couple of months, folks have been really focused on the restorative justice portions of this ordinance, and I'd like to interrogate Casey Vieto, who's the co-director of restorative justice at Interaction, formerly Youth Services. My question is, should I pose my question now? Or
Yeah,
do you?
please.
Okay, great. My question is, Interaction has been a part of the draft. They were consulted in the drafting of this ordinance, and people may be referred to their programs who are wrapped up in this ordinance. So I'd like to hear Casey's thoughts about the ordinance in general and how she thinks restorative justice may be impacted in our community based on this ordinance.
Ms. Vieto is interrogated. Yes, please. David.
Oh, I'm too short as well. Hi all, Casey Beato. As HB mentioned, I'm the co-director of restorative justice programs at Interaction, formerly known as Youth Services. So I want to address a couple of points tonight. First, a specific option that already exists in town, which law enforcement already have the ability to refer to, and how allowing this ordinance to stand jeopardizes eligibility into that program. So one of the programs that I supervise is known as the pre-charge program, which has been in Brattleboro since at least 2017. So to put it simply, the goals of pre-charge are to work with the responsible party to explore the harm that their actions have caused, engage with victims of these actions, and connect with support to reduce the chances of harm occurring again. Brattleboro Police Department can already refer to this program, and when a person is referred, they have 72 hours to reach out to our office. I did review the current MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, that we have with the state's attorney and the police department. And as of right now, all of the behaviors listed in the ordinance are covered by our MOU. As of yesterday, a total of 28 cases have been referred to the pre-charge program, and successful cases have included letters of apology to harmed parties, connecting with our behavioral health team for counseling, and referrals to community partners. Additionally, when there is a named victim, we engage in harmed party outreach to determine what needs that victim may have. So there are three things that I see as lacking in this ordinance. So one is data collection or reporting. We are missing a cost analysis, and we're missing victim engagement. To make sure I don't go over my time, I'm going to skip to the very end where I ask you to consider that Act 180 set forth in legislation that the pre-charge program will be moved to the Attorney General's office as of July 1st, 2025. Per the language of that bill, an individual that has committed a criminal offense may be referred to the pre-charge program. This ordinance makes these behaviors civil offenses, which means that folks in violation of this ordinance will not be able to participate in the pre-charge program as of July 1st, 2025. I have heard people say, let's give it a chance and adjust after, but none of us have the power to adjust state legislation. Unless you do, and please let me know. Upholding this ordinance will shut people out of programming at my agency. I am delighted that we want to work together to have a restorative response. And what I am asking is that we do this together rather than shutting people out from eligibility. I'm happy to provide more information if anyone would like about data reporting for restorative justice, the costs that it takes to run the program, or how victim engagement works. Thank you.
Mr. Ozer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had submitted some questions previously, and I believe the town manager and select board are aware of them. For the record, I'd like to go through some of them. Looking at the wording of the ordinance, is it sufficiently understandable to the common person of what's going on here, what's being talked about? Is it needlessly complex? Under Section 13435G, there are hearings that are alleged or contemplated to occur and to be held by the town. And I wonder whether those hearings are quasi-judicial and non-advisory. And I use those specific words because they're the words used in the recent amendment to the open meeting law. And if they are quasi-judicial and non-advisory, then certain requirements in the open meeting law come into play, and whether that's been figured out beforehand. Next question is a little bit of a soft question, whether in a quasi-judicial hearing, what are the guidelines for due process? And the easy answer to that question is it's the process that's due, right? But we know that from my experience with tax appeals hearings and tax abatement hearings, there are elements of due process which exist in those hearings, even though they don't exist in court. Or rather, the court would have more stringent requirements for due process. Is there any kind of an estimate, this may go to the data question, is there an estimate of the additional duties that are added to the town staff, an assessment of the real cost or opportunity cost of processing this new ordinance, having the appeals and the hearings, et cetera? And what other duties, the opportunity cost in my mind is, what other duties will not get accomplished if staff are pulled away to do this? I won't repeat what has just been said about the pre-charge program, but that's, I think, another key point to this, that there is I think, good emphasis in the ordinance on restorative justice, but how does that interface with what state law is saying, and how does it interface with our partners in restorative justice in the community? Has the ordinance been reviewed by independent counsel? Independent outside legal counsel? And I'll add an addendum to that because just the other day, I did run it past a former city attorney in a city in Vermont, who identified at least 5 problems with the ordinance and wording. But we don't need to go into that because the warning only talks about whether we approve or disapprove, or rather agree to disapprove, the way it's been phrased. Are we near the end of our time? I have 2 other points,
Well,
Mr. Moderator.
We're about 3.5 minutes. I've been holding back, but if you could wrap up, please.
I will. 2 points. I'll try to make them into 1 point. Section 13440 of the ordinance talks about this high response properties, and 4 incidents in 3 months would designate a property as high response. So the 2 questions there are, when a notice is given of high response, the ordinance says it will go to the owner according to the records in the assessor's office. Why doesn't it go to the property manager recorded in the Community Connect program of the fire department? It seems you'd want to get immediate response rather than just to get a letter out to an out-of-state property owner. And why not notify on the first instance rather than wait until there are 4, so we can resolve stuff easily and quickly? Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for letting me go over time.
I don't know if there were any of those inquiries that a member of the administration wants to be interrogated about.
I can answer some of those. With regard to the substantive due process, the ordinance has to be certain as to the conduct that you're trying to regulate, such that, and this is what the courts use as a test, so that persons of an ordinary intelligence do not have to guess at its meaning. From our standpoint, this is to answer, is it unduly wordy? We don't think that it is. We think that it identifies what behaviors are prohibited, what is a high response property. It has the particular zones, it has the levels of the conduct and how it's enforced, and an appeal process. With regard to the appeals, those go to the town manager or the town manager's designee. That is not a quasi-judicial body because it is one person, so open meeting laws would not apply because it's not a public body. As to the costs and the increased duties, I don't have an estimate as to the costs. I'm not sure if apparently town manager, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I'll address that, Bob. Yeah, we didn't do an estimate of that because we don't know the scale at which this would be implemented. So part of the whole thought process around this was we need to try get some implementation experience doing something like this. And so we went kind of with the easiest path there for now. But I think ultimately we might come back to the select board with a proposal to look at a body that might want to carry this load of work, something like the Traffic Safety Committee or the CPCC, to be doing the appeals and waivers.
And with regard to answering independent counsel, I have reviewed this. I don't believe the town has had any other attorney review it. And with regard to enforcement as against the owners, all of our enforcement is against owners. If we bring a zoning violation, for instance, that's against the owner. If there's an appeal with regard to property valuation, that's the owner, even though it might be a lessee that is complaining about the taxes. So that's not atypical for any of our ordinances.
The question is on the article to disapprove the acceptable conduct ordinance. Is there any further comments or discussion? Ms. Garza.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ruben Garza, District 9. Besides the punitive interventions, there are a lot of other things, including what was just said, that we need implementary experience at the expense of who, though, right? Like, we can't just implement this and then figure it out later, because there's real people's lives in danger here. But I'd like to speak on that later. I do not want to leave the RTM thinking that it's just some municipalities. In fact, it's 12 states that have outlawed this type of thing. Pennsylvania, Illinois, California, Minnesota, Colorado, Maryland, New York, Iowa, Nevada, Texas, Indiana, and Oregon. And settlements reaching about $700,000 at the most. I believe that's worth considering when you cast your vote. Thank you.
Jackie Reese, District 9. The question I have is just how simple is it to make changes, to make amendments to this? It is a long and well thought out, maybe not well executed in the understanding, but it is a well thought out plan that I feel addresses many of the needs of the downtown, of the people who work downtown, of the people who live downtown, and the people who used to enjoy downtown more. So it is flawed in some ways, and perhaps, and I know that there's already been some effort put into looking at different areas. Anytime that I've ever talked to a select board member about it, what exactly is the process of making changes? So I think, can we just do it the way that it is? We got the start on it. It took a long time to get that going. We have the start on it, and so we make adjustments along the way. How easy is it to do that?
A member of the administration is interrogated briefly to explain the process for amending an ordinance, please. Thank you.
Yes, the town ordinances are amended all the time. The process by which to do that is the agenda committee would place it on the select board's agenda. Staff would bring a first reading to a meeting at a separate second meeting, so that could be 2 weeks later. A second reading occurs, and then the select board often approves amendments to the ordinance at the second reading. Sometimes they don't. For instance, the vacant building ordinance they discussed at their last meeting is going to a third reading, so sometimes that happens. If anyone reads our code of ordinances, they'll see that they're, and no offense to former select boards, but they're extremely flawed in many areas, and we're fixing them all the time. It's just a constant process of continuous improvement on the Brattleboro Code.
Sarah Turbo, District 9. I'm a clinical social worker in this community, and I wanted to speak to the alternatives that are being offered if somebody is maybe requesting that they don't have to pay a fine. These alternatives that are in the code. First, this community has an incredibly long wait list in terms of providers. So when the option is given to be able to attend substance use or mental health treatment as opposed to being subject to these fines, where are they supposed to find these services, especially if they have Medicaid or don't have insurance? That's the first thing. The second thing, as part of my training, I was a social worker at a shelter for women with mental illness in New York City. And I had an experience where I had a client who got $35 a month in public assistance, Medicaid, and food stamps. That was the entirety of her public assistance. This was the height of the COVID epidemic. This was maybe November of 2020. She came into my office saying that she'd been ticketed $200 for jumping the turnstile at the subway because she couldn't afford the $2.75 fare. So she came to me and she said, I can't afford this, what should I do? And I said, okay, I'll write you a letter. So I wrote her a letter and said, this person is a resident in our homeless shelter. She receives $35 a month of public assistance, et cetera. And she took it to the bailiff down at the courtroom and they waived the fine. So that's a good outcome, in my opinion. How much time, money, energy, staff, whatever is that taking for us to have to go through that kind of process? Given the people who are probably most likely to be fined or be subject to this kind of ordinance, I imagine they are in similar financial situations to the one that my client was in at that time. And there's been a lot of questions about how these waivers, for example, will be handled by the town manager's office. And this is just an example of how this works in someplace else, a much bigger place with a lot more capacity than our town. And so I just want to add that texture to what that might look like for us to try to go through that. Thank you.
We're discussing Article 1. Any further comments or questions? Mr. Stroud.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Gary Stroud, District 8. I'm trying to wrap around this whole thing. It's sort of like an old saying, I guess my grandmother used to tell me, never raise too many devils you can't take down. The thing about this is you're creating something that's already there. The police are doing a bang-out job, I know for sure. We have the resources, but the bottom line is you don't have the tools or the resource mechanisms that were there. You didn't factor that in. And this is what I'm trying to get at, is that if you already have something that's there, why are you trying to add another layer and create more, knowing that next year there are cuts coming, and now you're putting it on people who they have to look around to find who's going to do it. And you're adding on more issues and stuff of defiancy on people who are going to be like, hey, you know what, if you're going to hit me with a fine or collections, guess what? Good luck collecting that. A lot of people get collections. We're going to be going through some uncharted waters next year, and I really think you need to take a step back and think about how you're going to structure this and how you are going to implement it and what tools and resources that are currently available that can come together as a whole and work together without trying to create the wheel all over again. So I'm just trying to figure that out, you know, what is the purpose of something that's already there? So I want to interrogate whoever is here that's part of the solution that they're already acting and doing. And as we know, there is funding that's not there and the resources because of budget cuts. And even with our state legislators and laws that need to be looked into again and other resources of economic services and help, I think we should take a step back and look at that because changes are coming. And the thing is, yeah, you may be starting out with this, but who's the guarantee that this is going to be a continual thing?
Ms. McLaughlin.
I think it's important to understand that what we are doing is having an alternative to the criminal statutes and having civil penalties with linkages to social services is an improvement over strictly using the existing criminal justice system. And I would like the town manager to be interrogated about the processes that have been questioned regarding its implementation.
Town manager's interrogated, if he chooses.
I mean, it's kind of like you were saying, Liz, we were looking for something that was a middle road, not going full criminal, like giving someone a criminal record for engaging with the police, but give them an alternative path that would be civil, and you know they wouldn't end up in the jail on Black Mountain Road, but they could enter this other process. So that was really what it was trying to do. I'm sure it's not perfect, but it is something we felt like we could learn from and develop better and better, so that there is an alternative that's not just the criminal justice system. And if the town attorney would
Town
care to
attorney
add
is
to that.
interrogated.
And just to add to that, some of the conduct that's listed in the prohibited behaviors may also be conduct for which the police could charge somebody criminally. And a lot of that is going to be police discretion based on the circumstances, but this gives the police a less intrusive, non-criminal, it's a civil ordinance, option to go this route. And also with regard to the issue of, like with the high response properties, that is a cost to the town. We don't know exactly what that cost is, but this is modeled after the City of Boston's ordinance on this, and they had found over a 10-year study that they had improvements with decreasing the number of calls to these high response places as a result of engaging the landowner or the property owner with the city officials. So a lot of this has the idea of interaction. It's not to substitute this entirely for other criminal statutes if the circumstances demand that, but it also allows the town to seek to go after these high response properties to pay for the extra services that the town provides. So for instance, we have an ordinance through the fire department. On many a winter weekend night, the fire department is called to I-91 to respond to a lot of accidents that happen out there. Of course, the fire department's going to go out there. But a lot of the I-91 towns, Brattleboro, Putney is another one, have these ordinances where when we respond, because that's like a high response area, the people being served by the response have to pay that. And so this is in many respects very similar to that, except you're trying to get the costs of the town's response being paid for by the property owner who's having these high response calls.
Virginia Goodman, we're 8 now, right? We're not 2, 8. So can you clarify something that would be a criminal offense would be now a civil offense in certain zones, but outside of that zone, that would still be a criminal offense. Is that how is that?
It's not quite that. It will depend on the circumstances and, in large respect, the police discretion as to, so take lewd and lascivious conduct. If that's happening, whether it's in one of these zones or outside of one of these zones, if it meets the level where the police officer thinks that should be charged criminally, my guess, and I'll let the police speak for themselves, but they're going to charge according to what the circumstances warrant. If they decide to go the non-criminal civil ticket route, then they would be able to give a ticket under this ordinance.
And they're encouraged to go civil within certain zones downtown? Is that how I read that?
I don't know is the word encouraged.
Member of the administration is interrogated if they can be.
Yeah, I would not say encourage. I'd say that's an option at their discretion. It's certainly the focus of the ordinance was on areas where children are present. It was for child safety zones. That's what was the interest of the select board in this sort of a approach. And so, yes, that it was a focus of the ordinance.
Ms. Melton.
Hi, PJ Milton, District 7. So I've heard a couple of things that have, I frankly find alarming. So I've never even gotten a speeding ticket in my life. I got pulled over once for my inspection sticker being outdated. And when I'm on the road and there's a cop near me, I freak out, okay? So when there are people in this room, when they hear the phrase police discretion, that's terrifying. That's terrifying. Police discretion is the main problem with the police. Like what they were saying before about, if there's an ordinance, you're supposed to, if the law is supposed to be followed evenly and enforced evenly. The other thing that I wanted to ask about, that wasn't a question. The question that I have is, okay, so we have these high response properties and we send a letter to a landlord in Florida, let's say. What are we, and you mentioned that, so the cost had gone down, like those high response properties magically became non-high response properties. There's a lot of steps missing in between there. What is the landlord being incentivized to do? What are the police being incentivized to do? What are the people who live there being incentivized to do in this case? How it's not just like magically this number goes down. Oh, we're not spending as much money on the police. Also, I just would like to point out that not spending as much money on the police hasn't seemed to be much of a priority for the select board. Thank you.
I think there was a question in the middle there that somebody from the administration might be interrogated about if they wish to be.
Did you get it?
Well, as far as the process part, the in-between, once the property owner is notified and informed of the intention of the town to impose charges for the cost of public safety, they are offered a collaborative meeting between the town and the property owner to discuss the management agreement. And then when you go back to the management agreement definition, that is a written agreement between the town and a property owner whose property has been identified as a high response property to undertake specific time-bound actions to address the underlying circumstances causing the police response or valid complaints, such as changing procedures, making structural repairs, providing high-quality management oversight, implementing technology, or hiring security. So that is in a nutshell, what the intent is of engaging the high response property owner to do a better job with their property.
We're discussing Article 1. Eli.
I'd like to respond directly to Ms. McLaughlin. She said that civil penalties with linkages to social services is an improvement to the criminal justice system in this area. And my question is, do you believe that you have those links to those social services when there are people in this room, those social services are here in this room saying they don't support this ordinance, that in fact this ordinance disqualifies or will disqualify people from their services? We're supposed to, or in theory, civil offenses are lesser than criminal offenses, but if the civil offense disqualifies them from the service that you are trying to funnel them towards or push them towards, do you believe that you have the links that you need to make that improvement on the system that exists? Thank you.
Member of the administration is interrogated, I think.
I should say I'm from District 8.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Thank you for your question. Yes, I do, because I know that the town manager and the Vermont State Social Service Agency have been working since April to establish the One Brattleboro Committee, which is local government and social services working together to solve these problems, to provide linkages between public safety and social services, and to identify a program for working together, especially to highlight through their outreach teams particular individuals who have many calls to the police and require a social service intervention. Franz.
Abby Manukin, District 8. I want to respond to Liz's most recent comment as well as one that was before, but the premise of my comment is there has been such a vast erosion of trust in town management, select board, and the town manager's office, and that was highlighted by the fact that there was actually a petition before this petition that requested this ordinance to be slowed down and take more input into consideration. It was railroaded through with 2 readings. The first petition was ignored, and the ordinance was passed despite vast opposition from the community. And One Brattleboro, which was just referred to, which is a collection of social service organizations, heads of those organizations, as well as people in town government, trying to work together at the intersection of public safety and public health. It is worth noting that a lot of those social service agencies, including Groundworks and Interaction, disapprove of this ordinance. So that actually is not highlighting working together. That is highlighting the fact that those, the people who are providing the services don't want to do what is being asked in this ordinance, and we need to listen to that.
Dr. Eichmann?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I've got a couple of reactions to things at this point. Over the past couple of days, there in fact was a get-together called a situation table where approximately 50 members of town staff, social service agencies, other public agencies from the state level and corrections department, a whole host of people concerned with these issues was going through a very specific way to address issues that come up where people are at acute risk in our community. And so, having had conversations with a number of those people, they're not opposed to this ordinance. They support this ordinance, a lot of them. Now, I know Groundworks has said otherwise, and we've heard from former youth services, I can't get all the names straight. Interaction. So, yeah, so clearly there's a big split in the community on this. There's no question about it. But that split also exists within the social service agencies. It is not true that there's some kind of uniform desire to see this ordinance withdrawn among the people who would be providing the services. At least that's my experience, and I think if you talk to those people, you'll find out that's true. But the bigger point I want to make is that we kind of have not been discussing here why this whole thing happened in the first place. What's the problem that this ordinance is intended to address? And our downtown area has some real problems right now. In fact, I think they're starting to get better just because we're talking about this stuff. But to back away from the process at this point, I think would be a mistake. I think we'd be much better off pursuing what seems to be working already in conjunction with our excellent police force and their ability to make real-time positive judgments about what's needed in a given situation. And they have demonstrated that time and again on the streets of Brattleboro. I think we need to put our faith in them and in our downtown. The downtown is something we need to support because it supports us. It is the social, cultural, and economic hub of our community. And if we let it deteriorate without doing anything, I think there will be a big price to pay. We have heard how legal technicalities threaten this ordinance. Well, I'll tell you what, that's not the real reason that people are opposing it. That's finally the window dressing, in my opinion. Sure, we can deal with that, but I trust Bob Fisher's opinion way more than I trust some ACLU article that I read today that clearly does not understand the situation in Brattleboro and clearly does not care about the situation in Brattleboro. So whatever you think of this, and I know that there are people who oppose it and have their reasons, but let's focus on why this is here, what the problems are, and what we can do about those problems. And I think this ordinance is part of that process.
Hello, my name is Cyrus Smith. I'm from District 7. I have grown up my whole life in the town of Brattleboro. I love the town of Brattleboro so much, but we have problems like all other places in the world. I have not been allowed downtown most of my life by myself or even with my friend groups. This is because we have a lot of problems in the town of Brattleboro that include things that are dangerous to our youth and our teens, and to regular adults as well. I understand that there are a lot of people who oppose this, and I understand that everybody thinks that they're doing what is right, what is good. And I believe in the good of society and the good of people, and I'm optimistic that even if there are challenges that come up with this ordinance, that we will work towards the betterment and the good of it. There is a lot of challenges in society in general, and we all work towards trying to change and make things better. That is the point of why there is a process of law, and that is why we can change things as we go forward. We can all make change and all make good, but we have to try before we can go and just dismiss everything. We have to make a change, and we have to try something different before we can just say things don't work. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan.
Robin Morgan, District 8. I am a parent in Brattleboro. I have a second grader and 2 teenagers. And I work in the downtown. I teach a class at the library as well as other employment. And I have a lot of concern about what we're seeing happening in our town as well. I think everyone here does. Nobody is happy seeing the amount of struggle that's going on in our town. And addressing that struggle has to be a core piece of getting our town to where we want it to be. So when we look at like what is underlying the unwanted behaviors that this ordinance is trying to govern, a lot of it is the housing crisis, opioid epidemic, and mental health struggles. None of those problems are addressed by this ordinance. And the fact that it only focuses on one area of the town is also troubling because it's just going to push those behaviors out of that zone into other parts of the town, like our neighborhoods. You know, I let my kids go downtown, and I actually feel like one of the most charming things to me about Brattleboro when I first moved here many years ago was seeing the gangs of teenagers walking around downtown on gallery night. That's like the most wholesome thing that I can imagine for teenagers to do on a Friday night. And when my own kids got to the age where they did that, I was overjoyed. But a lot of the behaviors that you might imagine teenagers engaging in, you know, hanging out together, are actually prohibited by this ordinance, being loud and boisterous, for instance. And so I don't feel like this ordinance is the way to protect our youth. And I also feel like some of the places that it's going to displace folks to are heavily trafficked by children. For instance, Canal Street. You know, I live right off Canal. My kids walk home from school like a legion of other kids coming home from middle school and high school. So if we're shoving all of the struggling folks out of the downtown region into the like South Main and Canal, those are where the kids are walking by themselves. And I really question if that is addressing the problem or just moving the problem.
The question's on Article 1. We're here. Yep. I know his name. Mr. Stannis.
Yes, hi, Trevor Stannis, District 9. It's hard to know where to start exactly with this ordinance, but I guess some of the things being said, to me, like a lot of these are the language is around behaviors, but they seem to cluster around a certain type of person, and I find that very distressing personally. When I look at this ordinance, I see a modern day vagrancy law. That's really the only way I can look at it. I also understand the rising costs to the town that were mentioned. Again, that is because of the national crises we're facing, the housing crisis, the opioid crisis that were mentioned. And we've seen time and time again that housing first and preventative measures, including harm reduction, housing first, increasing health and mental health service access, these things stop these problems before they begin, and they keep the types of people that many people here many people seem to not want to see on the street off of the street in the first place. And I saw a vast increase in this type of activity downtown the minute the motel voucher system was started to be pulled back. And I also see that the police have done a fine job of increasing patrols in areas such as Flat Street. And it seems like they're getting the results that this ordinance is intended for. When we break down like civil versus criminal ordinance, I just want to point to the fact that financial punishment is severely impacting on people, in ways that can be harmful, similar to criminal charges. And what I see needed is a non-police response to these problems. So I appreciate the Brattleboro Resource Assistance Team. I think that's a step in the right direction. But again, there's a lot of studies on separating these response systems from the police because interactions with the police and jail time make all of these problems worse. Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien.
Tara O'Brien, District 8. And I'm going to try to be articulate. I'm coming after my fellow Human Services Committee member. We're on this committee, and we see a dire need to support the human services in this town. That would be actually supporting the individuals most affected by this ordinance. I just happen to be part of, and thank you for bringing up One Brattleboro. I just happened to be part of the training for 2 days with some wonderful human services leaders and town officials, first responders, who came together in communities working together in this situation table, okay? Not to penalize the folks, but to bring them the support that they need, okay? There are funds that are connected to this project, state funds that wouldn't come out of our town taxes. I would implore the select board and all of my fellow town meeting members that this project, if we gave it a chance There are funds connected to it. People were leaving with the idea of, this is positive, this is encouraging. These were from human services directors who need money that we see on the Human Services Committee. I would implore slowing down, giving it a chance. I heard someone from Interaction, Ms. Casey, say that they need data. Do you have a way to collect data?
I do. I can actually provide you with 5 years worth of data about restorative justice or processing.
This process will collect the needs and the risk factors of the individuals who are recommended to the table. This is something that's not going to come out of municipal funds. The situation table, it came out of one Brattleboro that was held. There was a large meeting in April of this year with human services directors, people from the municipal select board, the town manager was there, I believe. And out of that process, this is the intersection of the Department of Public Health and the Department of Safety. This is coming from the governor's initiative on safety. And I really wish we would slow down and just, for me, knowing that this is coming, this is going to be rolled out by next year, like really pushes me to vote down the ordinance because I know what's coming. I wouldn't speak so from the heart if I knew that there was an alternative coming. If not, please give us more money on the Human Services Committee.
Mr. Quip?
Thank you. Daniel Quip, District 8. I was mostly planning on staying silent this evening, but the last 2 speakers inspired me, I think. And so what I wanted to say really is that the Brattleboro Select Board and the town administration and all of the town departments have been working really hard on public safety all year long. And so this ordinance that's drawing a lot of attention is one thing that the board and the town administration worked on this year. The One Brattleboro project that we've been working on for quite some time now is a really encouraging project, and the situation table training is a piece of that project. We've been meeting monthly for the last 4 months now, I think. We had a convening in April that one of the speakers mentioned, and that is a project that is attended by community partners, mostly across social services and housing and public safety. And I'm part of that group. I also work for one of the providers, and colleagues of mine attended the situation table training the last 2 days and reported back to me really positive results. And so I want to point out that there is a lot going on, and that actually I think there are reasons to feel positively about many things that the Select Board and Town Administration have done this year. I think that the Brattleboro Resource Assistance Team's creation is a good thing. One of the speakers before mentioned that, and I was pleasantly surprised to hear that. That is a project that is underway right now. It was funded by an emergency use of unbudgeted dollars, which is a controversial thing and which many of you may feel some feelings about when it comes to your tax bill, but I also know that many of you feel feelings about having an appropriate level of public safety response in our downtown area. And so I want to kind of encourage folks to take a bigger picture view of our questions around public safety right now, and maybe take a look at some of the work that the town administration and the Select Board have been doing this year on that topic.
Ms. Rowell?
Thank you, Peter Elwell, District 9. Thank you, Daniel, for that and for the others that have spoken to the variety of different ways in which town government has been taking action around the concerns that brought us here tonight, and how the community has taken action, a variety of organizations and individuals. And that actually, for me personally, just underscores the necessity of us voting yes tonight to disapprove this ordinance, because the ordinance is getting in the way of all that effective collaboration. It's dividing us as a community. I personally am opposed to the ordinance for reasons I've expressed in an email to all the members here tonight, so I won't belabor that. There are other people who are opposed to the ordinance as well. But even for those people who think that the ordinance might be a good thing, I'd encourage you to see the way in which it is dividing us as a community, where so many other efforts are being made by town government and by people in the community who care about each other and care about the community. We need to invest in those things. We need to further invest in One Brattleboro. And I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing from people about the situation table. There are other things that we do together in addressing ways to support individuals in our community and ways to hold each other accountable in our community. But this ordinance is dividing us apart, and people are taking sides, and it's interfering with our ability to collaborate effectively together. So I would hope that even if you entered the room tonight personally liking the idea of the ordinance, that you might see the way in which it's pulling us apart and vote tonight to disapprove the ordinance and keep investing ourselves in collaboration.
Mr. Agave?
On one quick note, when it was explained to me what the consequences of the section on finding landlords could be, that somebody in great need in a domestic situation will not call for help for fear that then the landlord will go through with an eviction, a no-cause eviction. And I think we would all be shocked if we knew how many evictions have occurred in this town over the last few years. But more importantly, what I hear is that this ordinance is good for downtown business. That's what I've heard for the entire 36 years I've lived here. For longer than that, this town's economy started to tank in the 70s, when industry was moving out looking for less expensive labor, when corporations were buying up small places, et cetera, et cetera. There have been a few good years, but for the most part, it's been a downhill ride ever since. And I believe we are the second poorest community in the state, or right down at the very bottom, and have been there for scores of years now. And all the select boards, all the King's select boards, all the King's BDC members, for all the years I have been here, have done nothing to change that direction. And what they have always agreed on is that what they had to do, their goal was always to improve the success of business. They have not thought about of the poor, of why people are poor. They have not been able to come up with an alternative approach. And I feel, in a way, it's kind of built into our charter, which essentially calls for the select board, which we like to think as the leadership. Their responsibilities are largely just to fill the potholes. And for most of them, that's what they do. Planning for the future is not something that's ever been very high on the agenda of any board or any leadership in this town. And I think we need to defeat this to keep this problem in the spotlight and to re-energize, rebuild, create a whole new process and a new way of approaching the problems.
Mr. Case?
Thank you. Yeah. So I think in large part what's brought us here tonight are grandiose statements like our friend Spoon just made about saying we're all King's people. So This has no place in this conversation. It's a narrative snatch. It changes the conversation. It gets us looking away from the problem at hand. My colleague Franz was pretty vocal about why we are here. I'm going to bring it back to why we are here. We are here in large part because our downtown has a perception of absolute erosion. Now, nobody at this table ever blamed anybody who was unhoused. Nobody at this table looks to criminalize poverty. Nobody. So I just want to make that clear. This is all things that the people who are opposed to this ordinance have interjected on this conversation, and it has no place here. We had 3 or 4 select board meetings in a row where 100+ people begging this board to do something and do something quickly was in occurrence. And it has been my understanding that there's been only one other time in the history of select board meetings where something like that has happened, and that was for one meeting. This happened 4 or 5 times in a row. I am downtown all the time. I can't make it from my shop to the bank in under 10 minutes, which it should, without somebody asking me what we were going to do. I shouldn't say that's happening now. That was happening in the height of all the problems. This ordinance was originally addressed for downtown safety issues for children. In October of 2022, a letter was circulated through downtown from one of these service agencies that people seem to think all these service agencies are against this ordinance. That's where this originally started, this conversation. It's actually what propelled me to get involved in town government. And that ordinance was about a child safety corridor, which presumably Flat Street at the time, a downtown child safety ordinance that would allow our kids not to have a problem with the transportation center, with the Preston lot, with what was going on down there, that no kid felt safe going from the youth theater to the Boys and Girls Club. That is why we are here. Make no bones about it. Everything else is just grandiose statements and narrative snatches. And it's exhausting to fight it. It's exhausting to read about it in the newspaper. There is not a single person sitting up here that looks to criminalize anybody. We are here to help this community grow. And we are looking for ways to help this community grow. One thing that democracy doesn't do is it doesn't move quickly. As I said, this plan has been in place for 4 years. It's been in an actionable state for 2 years, and nothing has happened until recently. And then the minute it does, nobody wants to give it a shot and give it a chance to try to succeed. You all rather just sit here and shoot it down because for whatever reasons you have. And you're entitled to those opinions, and I appreciate them. I've heard some interesting thoughts as we move forward, if this thing stands, how we can change and improve this. But we can't if we're just going to kill it.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Isaac Evans France. I'm a resident of District 8. I run a national human rights advocacy organization and am deeply concerned about this ordinance in my personal capacity. We're all here because we care and we want a better Brattleboro. We want children to be able to play, we want businesses to thrive, and we want people to have the resources that they need. We do need action, and there's quiet work that's happening that we've heard from a couple of speakers about. There's a lot of other initiatives that are quiet that we don't all know about, that are happening, and we need to support them. In terms of the issue of the high response properties, this has been tried in many states, ordinances like this, and we heard a list of states from Mr. Ruben Garza that have outlawed nuisance ordinances like these because of the problems that they've created. We've heard about how this targets owners of properties, but it's often the residents, the tenants, who pay the price. Property owners are incentivized because of the fines that are levied against them for when there's going to be in Brattleboro, the ordinance says that if there are more than 3 calls to the police from one address in a 3-month period, then there will be this fine. That incentivizes owners to evict tenants who call the police, who are going to be incurring fines for them. One assault survivor reported in a municipality with an ordinance like this, quote, "If getting abused, raped, shot, you're not allowed to call the police because they say it's a nuisance law, we just in danger. If anything happens to us, we can't call no police. We just got to deal with it." My question for my fellow representatives here is, does that make our town safer when people are afraid to call the police? I think the answer is no, and that's why I will be voting in favor of this article to overturn the ordinance. Thank you.
Mr. Cram.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Will Cram, District 8. I want to start out by saying that I agree with our former town manager that this ordinance is flawed and unnecessary. Some of you have observed, I think correctly, that the behaviors that the ordinance seeks to target are already illegal under our state criminal code. So then the question becomes, why do we need this ordinance? And the answer is, we don't. It's both too narrow and it's too broad. Let me give you an example. When I walk through the Prospect Hill Cemetery, I witness drug deals. I see people smoking crack in the woods. The other day I saw a young man shooting up behind a tombstone. That's very sad. I don't want to see that in my neighborhood. But you know what? This ordinance doesn't touch that. Why? Because the cemetery is not one of these special protected areas. And let me give you an example of why this ordinance is too broad. Tuesday is Needle Exchange Day at the AIDS Project of Southern Vermont. That is a free, anonymous public health services provided to residents in this community. People who come there to turn in their dirty needles and get clean needles commit a Class A violation under this ordinance because they are in possession of drug paraphernalia in a protected zone. What's the message that the town is sending? We want to discourage people from using clean needles so we can increase the risk of HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis? Look, homelessness, mental illness, substance abuse disorders, these are not unique problems to Brattleboro. If I'm homeless and I'm addicted to fentanyl or heroin, and I'm dope sick, and I'm desperate for money, and I'm panhandling outside the co-op, and a police officer comes along and under this ordinance issues me a Class A violation with a $200 fine, what's the point of that? I can't pay a fine. I don't have a pot to piss in. You want to help me? I don't like this life. I want to be clean and sober. Send me to rehab. But see, here's the problem. We've got 2 residential treatment facilities in this state, Serenity House and Grace House. If you're fortunate enough, after your screening to be accepted for admission, you may wait months before you get in there. And then once you're in there, lo and behold, Vermont Medicaid will pay for 14 days, maybe 21 days, and then you're out, you're discharged. Where's the step-down facility? Where's the long-term treatment? Where's the sober house where I can continue my treatment? You know what? It doesn't exist. What happens to me? I'm discharged to the community, and I'm back in Brattleboro in my old element, and boom, I relapse or I overdose. That's the reality, folks. And this ordinance does absolutely nothing to address those issues. You know, in my experience, people who have substance use disorders have significant trauma in their history. Women who are survivors of sexual or domestic violence, sex trafficking, co-occurring mental disorders. These are serious issues. These people need our help. They need our compassion. They don't need our condemnation. Now, for those of you who have a copy of the ordinance, I invite your attention.
We're close to
Yeah,
4
yeah.
minutes already, so do what you can, please.
To the bottom of page 6, which is the no trespass provision. And in my view, this is the heart of this ordinance because it gives the police the authority to issue a notice against trespass to any person who commits any violation, no matter how minor, in a protected area, which effectively bans them from the public space. And in my view, this is inhumane. We might as well ask the fire department to put a banner across Main Street that says, "Are you homeless? Are you mentally ill? Do you suffer from drug or alcohol addiction? Go home. We don't want you in our town." That's the message that this ordinance sends. And I don't agree with that message.
Thank you. Over here. Over here. Yeah, yeah. No, you.
I'm Marta Gossage, District 9. I wanted to just put into context so we all know what we're talking about, that wealth and income inequality in this country are at historic levels. We've passed the Great Depression and we're at right before the French Revolution levels. To put that into context, what that means for Brattleboro, 50% of our town are renters. Half. That's really high. And as it happens, I did go on the ACLU website and read the article. So an excerpt from Dialing 911 Can Get You Evicted. The adoption of nuisance or crime-free ordinances reflects a broader trend nationally, with cities coercing landlords to penalize and evict tenants who call the police or who simply live in properties where criminal activities occur. Rather than promoting public safety, research shows that these ordinances discourage residents from reporting crime and create distrust of law enforcement. These ordinances particularly harm communities of color, low-income households, people with disabilities, domestic violence survivors, and other people who are otherwise deemed undesirable. And as an example of that happening in our town, there was an article on the front page of the Reformer, can't remember, last week or week before, where a developer who had purchased several properties was kind of glorifying and saying, you know, we bought these properties and we fixed them up and we re-tenanted all the buildings. Well, re-tenanted, I guess, means evicted. And that just sounds like you just flat out evicted everybody. We want new tenants, but those people don't disappear into puffs of air and float away. They're still people. And most people who become homeless stay in the town they were made homeless in. So in the same article, that developer was complaining about the homeless in town, that it keeps growing and growing. And I don't think he even saw the irony. So when we talk about penalizing tenants who call the police, I mean, we're talking about landlords, but let's be clear. Landlord will get really mad at that last tenant who calls that one time that gets them the fine, and they will likely be evicted. So what are we doing with this? This just doesn't seem sustainable, and it seems like half the town will be afraid to call the police because maybe there'll be that last call from that building that gets that landlord fired or gets them a letter, gets them fired up, comes in and evicts them. Thank you.
As a general matter, the rules would discourage reading articles into the record. I would ask you please not to make those types of comments. People who haven't spoken yet? I think the hands I'm seeing, all right. Yes, Ms. Byrne.
Well, everybody, I've heard a lot of discussion here tonight, and it's been very informative. However, the last little bit of the discussion seems to be meandering away from the crux of what we're here to discuss, which is the ordinance. I I don't doubt that we have homeless issues in this town, and I know there's a lot of good people who are trying to address it, but this is not the forum to discuss homelessness. We're discussing an ordinance. So out of respect for everyone's time in here, including my own, I would like to call the question.
Hold on. It's not appropriate to call the question after speaking. So if somebody wants to raise their hand and call the question, that's fine. Ms. Ferranti?
Yes, it's not all right. I'd like to call the question, please.
All right, then. Just so you know, you can't make a comment and then move the question. So, a motion to call the question is non-debatable, requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of ceasing debate, please rise. Be seated. All those opposed to ceasing debate, please rise. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And debate is ceased. All right, then. The question before the body. Will the town disapprove the amendment to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, Chapter 13, Article 9, acceptable community conduct as adopted by the Select Board on September 17, 2024? Debate having ceased, I'm just going to clarify again for all people who are in attendance. A yes vote is to disapprove the ordinance. A no vote is to leave the ordinance in place. All those in favor of Article 1, please rise and remain standing until counted. I don't think you need to hold your cards up. Standing is enough exercise. We're finished with the count. All those, are you be seated? All those opposed to Article 1, please rise and remain standing until. Jane, they can be seated. You can be seated. Listen to the results of your vote. 76 are in favor, 55 opposed. Article 1 carries, and you have disapproved the amendment to the Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, Chapter 13, Article 9, Acceptable Community Conduct, as adopted by Select Board on September 17, 2024. Article 2 is to transact any other business that may lawfully come before the meeting. Is there any other non-binding business? Ms. Kornheiser.
Representative Burke and I'm Emily Kornheiser. We would just like to take this moment, along with our Senate colleague, to bid farewell to our colleague Tristan Tolino and thank him for his incredible service to the town.
If you were elected today to be a town meeting member, your term of office ends on town meeting day. And if you want to run again, it's nice to have a full complement of town meeting members. If you want to run again, you need to get a petition and gather signatures, because if you're re-upping, you can just submit a notice of intent to be reelected. But since you haven't been elected yet, if you've been appointed, caucused in, either at town meeting in March or today, you need to gather signatures and put in that petition to get on the ballot. Please, we encourage you to do so. Please be in touch with the town clerk, Hillary Francis. Hillary Francis. We thank everybody for participating tonight and for being caucused in. Is there any further business? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. Ms. Linden, a second. All those in favor? Good night.